Gabe was the kind of a man that any man would want to be. Not the star, but the man.
I have a zest for life, absolutely. He always had that.
Gable is the most tragic man that the motion picture business has ever had.
He said, I have one thing to offer. I love being alive. I love life.
Clark Gable. He appeared in 90 films, most of them surging with action, adventure, and danger. All the surefire Hollywood ingredients. But to them, Gable brought a distinctive quality matched by no other star of his generation or any generation. Surrounded by jeopardy, he seemed not only to belong, he seemed to be having one hell of a good time. In films like Gone with the Wind with Vivien Leigh, Gable as Rhett Butler became more than a movie star. He found a permanent place in our consciousness by expressing a uniquely American ethic, that a man's real business is to make his life exciting and romantic.
You was divinely, Cap Butler.
Don't start flirting with me. I'm not one of your plantation beaux. I want more than flirting from you.
What do you want?
I'll tell you, Scarlett O'Hara. You'll take that Southern Belle Simple off your face. Someday I want you to say to me the words I heard you say to Ashley Wilkes. I love you.
That's something you'll never hear from me, Captain Butler, as long as you live.
Let the whole world stop. As far as I'm concerned, you'll always be the top. 'Cause you know you made me love you.
Writers, at least good writers, always had a field day analyzing Clark Gable's appeal and significance. For instance, Ben Hecht wrote, "When Gable arrived, the movies became the most successful thing since the Roman Empire. Gable was America's dream of itself, a symbol of courage." Well, that's a tall order to fill, but Gable did it better than anybody else. Try to imagine any star today filling Gable's shoes as Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, and you'll see what I mean. Tonight, in highlights from his great movies, in rarely seen personal films, and in interviews with those who knew him best, we'll explore his life and career, the man and the myth, in Clark Gable Remembered. Our guests, actor and buddy Andy Devine, director and friend William Wellman, newspaper woman and pal Adela Rogers St. John, and co-star Yvonne DeCarlo. For a romantic hero who'd set women's hearts aflame, Clark Gable began his career in a strange way.
I made a bargain with my father. I didn't know how it was going to turn out.
Well, what was the bargain?
In the midst of the Depression, with audiences in no mood for the silken boudoir stratagems of a Valentino or a Gilbert, Gable made his mark as a gangster in A Free Soul by pushing around an upper-class Norma Shearer. She'd be the first of many girls to receive the Gable treatment.
You did what?
Cut that. Cut it now and leave it lay.
Cut what? I don't know what you mean.
I suppose when he gets you home, he asks you to take it on the run and get me out of your system, huh?
Please don't do that. I don't like it.
No?
Besides, what business is it of yours?
You're an idiot. A spoiled, silly brat that needs a hairbrush every now and then.
You're pretty good at that hairbrush sort of thing, aren't you?
You ought to know. You're my girl, see, and you always will be. Even if I have to lick you to prove it.
Salt.
Garbage. They're good enough for a man when he's starving. So you'll do too, baby.
Thanks.
You want to work with me?
Yes, Mr. Gibson.
Shake.
Yes, sir.
Now beat it.
Thank you.
You better listen to what I'm saying, or I'll knock that smile off your face.
Knock it off.
Oh, you dirty, sod-busting, woman-chasing connoisseur.
That's all, Prospector. Looks like she's in love with you, hermano.
I'm not a one-woman man. I never have been, and I never will be. But if you want to take your turn... All right. If it makes you feel any better.
Put him around me.
It was bound to happen. Long before women's lib, Gable projected an arrogant masculinity and left no doubt that the woman who shared his bed would wake up smiling.
Oh, I wish you hadn't.
Why not?
Oh, I haven't let myself think about us. I didn't dare.
Why?
Oh, I don't know. I've had sort of a strange premonition. I don't know exactly how to explain it.
Explanations belong 5,000 miles away. I only have one question, and I only want one answer.
You know the answer.
I don't want to know the answer. I want to have the answer.
If you don't want to stay and look for him, you can go without me.
With no Freudian kinks in his psyche, Gable's approach, similar to that of a randy tomcat, consisted of sweeping girls off their feet in picture after picture. This is Gable doing his thing with Mary Astor in Red Dust in 1932. "20 years later, Red Dust is remade and called Mogambo. Playing opposite Grace Kelly this time, Gable in his same role as the only star left in the original picture. Such is his extraordinary staying power as a romantic symbol. Born in 1901 in Cadiz, Ohio, William Clark Gable gave no hint of such remarkable things to come. Raised by a gentle stepmother, Clark would have a strong need for her, as he would later for other women in his life. He grows up an apparently ordinary kid, distinguishing himself at nothing. Only a fair student, he attends a local grade school and is described as an attractive child with large gray eyes and some talent for music. He's not especially ambitious, and he quits high school after 2 years to drift around. As for girls, though he makes a show of breezy confidence with them, he feels inwardly awkward and shy. His father, a tough oil driller, finally takes him to work in the Oklahoma oil fields. Someday, Gable would play a swashbuckling oil man in Boomtown, but the reality is far different. Gable hates living one step removed from poverty. It scars his soul. Somehow he knows he must escape this kind of life forever. Unskilled at anything, he decides at 21 to enter a colorful world, the theater as an actor. In a theater group, he meets Franz Dorfler, who coaches him and helps him get some bit parts.
I met him in the rehearsal hall at Portland, and he had a Brooks Brothers suit and 2 shirts with French cuffs and a Gladstone bag, and that is about all. He was insecure because of hardship, financial trouble, and he had to be reassured that he was liked. And I didn't like him at first because I thought he was aggressive, and I was very shy. I had never had a beau, really, that I cared about, and so I resented him a little bit, but he was so kind and nice, and we always had banana cream pie for lunch every day, and he paid for that. And so one night he asked me if I would rehearse his lines, and I did. And so he leaned over and kissed me, and that shocked me. I just sat there, and so I wasn't accustomed to it. But then I thought how wonderful this is. I've met somebody that likes to be an actor, and so do I, and wouldn't this be fun? And so it didn't take me very long. Then I became so terribly fond of him that I couldn't bear to be away from him.
But though apparently in love, marriage to a struggling actress is impractical for a young actor like Gable, driven by the lash of ambition. And finally he breaks off with her. Besides, into his life has entered a second woman. Josephine Dillon is 14 years older than Gable, a former Broadway actress, now a dramatic coach with a sharp eye for natural talent. She agrees to take young Gable under her wing. Before long, Clark, dependent on her guidance, marries Miss Dillon, and together they collaborate on the creation of Clark Gable. Now Gable meets Rhea Langham, a wealthy socialite who dabbles in the theater. She can open doors for him. At the age of 29, Gable marries Rhea, who is 17 years older than he. Through his wife, Gable gets the stage role of Killer Mears in The Last Mile, an electric performance that opens the way to Hollywood. Gable now finds a home at MGM, where a few years before he had toiled as an extra, lost in crowd scenes. Film historians dig back into Clark Gable's earliest days in Hollywood the way archaeologists explored Pompeii, searching for artifacts and treasure. If they dig back far enough, they find that one of his oldest friends, dating from 1926, was a character actor and a great character, whose trademark was a voice that sounded like an asthmatic vacuum cleaner, Andy Devine.
Peter, the first time I think that I was ever conscious of Gable was right around that time. We were talking, a show had just opened in Los Angeles called The Last Mile. Yeah. And they were all raving about the guy that played Killer Mears, the heavy in it. And they were talking about it at lunch on the Collegians, and they said, well, you remember him. He's the guy with the bad teeth that worked on the set with us, you know. And I remembered him right away, but in the meantime, he had gotten his teeth fixed and had gone on, and I don't think anybody was ever had any ideas that he'd turn out to be the tremendous star that he did, because he was just another guy working extra, and
I mean, the teeth did it for him.
The teeth did it for him, I guess.
Gable would ultimately make about $500,000 a year. What kind of money were you making?
I think at that time I was under a stock contract at Universal, and I was doing all right. I think I was getting $45 a week.
At that time, what promise, if any, did he give of becoming the star of the magnitude that he finally did?
He was never really conscious of it. He was having fun and doing what he wanted to do, and whenever you called him the king or the stud or anything like that, he'd kind of giggle and hide his head like, like he'd been caught, you know. Yeah. And he was enjoying it because it was a game, and I remember one time we were all sitting around talking about how do you know when you've reached the pinnacle of your career?
Yes.
And there was a lot of different answers, and finally Gabe said, you know, I think when I have hit the pinnacle of my career will be the day that I walk down Washington Boulevard, take out my upper rack and throw it right through Louis B. Mayer's window.
His father really wasn't too impressed with his being a movie star, was he?
Oh, well, no. I mean, you know, it's his father felt like, I had an old aunt that used to say, what are you doing? And I'm saying, I'm in pictures. Said, I know that, but how do you make a living, you know? And and to the day she died, I never explained to her how I made a living. But that's why I was so thrilled when Kay gave him a child, and I think the saddest thing that ever happened was he didn't live to see it, because he would have been so thrilled at this son and at her. It was to, you know, giving him
It was really a tragedy. Who else would go on these hunting trips with you?
Well, there was Abner of Lemon Abner and his wife Liz, and that was the biggest. And then there was a friend of ours by the name of Jim Smith, and we used to hunt at a place called Harry Fleischman's, and we had a little trailer, or Clark and Carole had a little trailer parked up there, and we'd go out to get in the blind, say about 5:30 or 6, but Carole would get up, anywhere between 3 and 4, and make sandwiches for everybody to take out to their blinds. We had one pond of our own, and just the, well, I think we had 2 barrels on it, and usually she, and one day Carole dropped him right in the middle of the blind. He was standing around looking the wrong way. She hit a duck, hit him right in the middle of the shoulder blades, and just took him right to the bottom of the barrel. And she said, that'll teach you to pay attention.
Andy, you've told us what he liked. Tell us some of the things that bugged him.
Oh, I don't know what really bugged him. He, big crowds bugged him.
Yeah.
Invasion of his privacy bugged him. And
I'll go along with that.
You know, I think it bugs everybody, you know, a little bit, but he did realize that it was a part of being the king, you know, that you're bound to be bugged. But you know, we used to laugh. We'd go out and people would come up and say, Mr. Gable, may I have your autograph? And turn right around and say, Andy, can I have yours, you know? But there was, they treated him with a dignity that was, you know, that I don't...
Fitting a king.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think I've ever heard anybody come up and say, Clark, will you sign this? It was even, you know, man, Mr. Gable, you know, and it was always Mr. Gable, you know, and then Carole would say, Mr. Gable, you know. So that's just to keep him down to our level, you know. And it was really fun.
You didn't see as much of Gable after the war. Why was that?
I really don't know. I think that after Carole was killed, that anybody that was real close to them brought back memories that he would just as soon do as without.
Yeah.
And I think the only one that he ever saw of the old group was Madeline Fields, who was as close to him as one of his own family, you know, she and Walter Lang. And
what he was trying to do was wipe the slate
clean. The slate clean, you know, and but whenever we'd run in, it was always a big hug, and there was still that friendship that you knew that would always be there, but you knew that the minute that you got together, that it was bringing up memories that he'd rather not kick around, you know.
Thank you for letting us invade your privacy.
Peter, it's been wonderful, and to talk about and reminisce about Gabe is no invasion.
Clark Gable was so good, so natural at what he did, that for a long while nobody took him seriously as an actor. But in 1934, because he was giving MGM a hard time over being typecast, they decided to punish him by farming him out to Columbia for what was to be a minor movie directed by Frank Capra. To almost everyone's surprise, including Gable's, he won an Academy Award for his deft handling of classic scenes like The Night in the Motel. as Claudette Colbert finds herself safe from the rain, but not from Gable.
Perhaps you're interested in how a man undresses. You know, there's a funny thing about that. Quite a study in psychology. No two men do it alike. You know, I once knew a man who kept his hat on until he was completely undressed. Yeah, now he made a picture. Years later, his secret came out. He wore a toupee. Yeah. You know, I have a method all my own. If you'll notice, the coat came first, then the tie, then the shirt. Now, according to Hoyle, after that, the pants should be next.
It happened one night, was Gable at the top of his form, playing Gable. Shortly after, he did a film called Parnell, where he veered from his carefully crafted screen image, and it was a fiasco. Playing a sensitive Irish patriot, he proved that Gable, when he wasn't being Gable, could die in more ways than one.
Now that I am overthrown, there will rise such a tide of fear and treachery as Ireland has never known before. Carry on my fight for Ireland, I charge you. See that Ireland is never defeated. Never defeated.
Fortunately, Gable stuck to films like Mutiny on the Bounty, a fine sea epic where his personality and his role reinforced each other, where he was a match even for a great actor like Charles Laughton.
She's flying, Mr. Christian. Tahiti direct, sir. Tahiti direct, Mr. Christian. Pass it on. No change of sail without my orders. Put 2 men at the wheel. We'll carry on or carry under. Very good, sir.
Mr. Bly, I can't sign this book. No such amounts have been issued to the men.
Now, look here. You've signed day books before with a few extra kegs in the ship never carried.
I have, sir.
And why not? We all do it. We'd be fools if we didn't on a lieutenant's pay, and I want to stow away enough to keep me out of the gutter when I'm too old for service.
I understand. The captain's prerogative. Ordinarily, I wouldn't mind.
Why is this case different?
Because the captains I've served with before didn't starve their men. They didn't save money by buying up the stinking meat that you put aboard at Tenerife. They didn't buy yams that was sick in a pig and force them on their crew.
Silence!
They didn't call their men thieves and flog them the bone because they complained about it.
You impudent scoundrel! Sign that book!
I refuse. And you have no authority that can make me.
I haven't! I'll show you authority. Lay all hands aft! All hands aft!
Nearing the height of his career, Gable in his late 30s marries Carole Lombard, a brilliant comedienne, on and off the screen. She loves nightclubs till dawn, but she'll give it up for Gable, who prefers the great outdoors. Various women had furthered Gable's career. In Carole, he seeks and gets happiness. (1939), Atlanta, Georgia, the premiere of Gone with the Wind. Barely 10 years before, Clark Gable had been a struggling actor, insecure and unknown. By sheer force of ambition and personality, he's become the most famous star of his time, in the biggest movie of his time.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I am here just as a spectator. I want to see Gone with the Wind the same as you do. And this is Margaret Mitchell's night and the people of Atlanta's night. Allow me, please, to see Gone with the Wind as a spectator. Thank you.
From that night on, Gable not only played Red Butler, he became Red Butler.
My dear, I could tear you to pieces with him. And I'd do it if it'd take Ashley out of your mind forever. But it wouldn't. So I'll remove him from your mind forever this way. I'll put my hands so, one on each side of your head. And I'll smash your skull between them like a walnut. That'll block him out.
Take your hands off me, you drunken fool.
You know, I've always admired your spirit, my dear. Never more than now when you're cornered.
I'm not cornered. You'll never corner me, Red Butler, or frighten me. You've lived in dirt so long you can't understand anything else. And you're jealous of something you can't understand. Good night.
It's not that easy, Scarlett. You turned me out while you chased Ashley Wilkes, while you dreamed of Ashley Wilkes. This is one night you're not turning me out.
Here is vintage Clark Gable. In Call of the Wild, as in dozens of movies, Gable played a strong man involved with a beautiful girl, Loretta Young in this case. These were the days when you went not to the cinema, but to the movies. Call of the Wild was one of Clark Gable's memorable early hits. His director and friend was one of the most extraordinary men in the business. A high school dropout, he flew for the Lafayette Escadrille in World War I, then went on to direct such films as Wings, Public Enemy, A Star is Born, Borges, The High and the Mighty, Oxbow Incident. For various notorious reasons, all of which he is proud, he's known as Wild Bill Wellman. Bill, it's nice to see you again.
Thank you.
You're looking terrific.
Well, for my age, yes.
How do you account for Gable's enduring stature? Was he a very good actor? In your opinion?
No. But you shouldn't take me literally, because I didn't get along very well with, as you know, with many of the stars. To me, the three big stars today, two are dead. That's Gable and Bogey. And one that's alive, you'll have to shoot him to kill him, you know. And you will. Who do you think I'm talking about? This guy, he'll never die.
Yeah.
And he just finished a picture with Duke. He just finished a picture with Hepburn. And they, to me, are really three great stars.
I agree.
Now, I don't know which one of the three is the greatest. Gable was a great star, and I always had the feeling, having directed practically all of them, for instance, Wally Berry, that if you as a director could keep them within that circle of whatever it was that gave them that business that made them a star, and not let go overboard on them, yeah. You're a good director.
Yeah. When you directed him in Call of the Wild, there was and the story was that he wasn't paying too much attention. He was paying too much attention to monkey business. What did you do about that?
Well, you see, I was going to tell you that, but I wasn't even going to be, I wasn't even going to say monkey business. However, you said it, he was paying too much attention to monkey business. We're on top of Mount Baker in Washington in the middle of the winter, and it's cold, awfully cold, and he wouldn't come to work on time. And as you probably know, I had a frightful way of losing my temper. Frightful temper, let's put it that way. And finally, I did something I should never have done. I got mad and lost my temper in front of the whole crew. I told him what I thought about him. I said, you coming here at 11 o'clock when the call is at 9, and all the property men and the grips and everybody else are freezing their shoulders off, me too, and you're a big guy, and I weigh 150 pounds. But you make your living with your face. And I don't. I'm behind the camera. No one gives a damn what I look like. But I weigh 150 pounds, and it's 150 pounds that has been well educated in the Foreign Legion, and it's a dirty 150 pounds. And I can assure you that maybe I'll go to the hospital. I don't know anything about it, but you're going to be a different kind of a looking kind of a guy.
You were going to make him into a
guy? No, it was on the level. And I wasn't afraid. And I was wondering whether, because he's a big man.
I know.
And nothing happened, and he sort of turned around and walked away, and then we went on. And it was Mr. Gable and Mr. Wellman from then on. For 2 years it was Mr. Gable and Mr. Wellman.
Really?
Yeah.
In Call of the Wild, you had Gable starring opposite a dog. How'd they get along?
I got to tell this quickly, too, because I'd be here forever. You know how it is in the picture business. The big scene was the dog pulling this 1,000 pounds, 100 yards. We did it in the San Fernando Valley in the middle of the summer. We had fake snow. We had a hospital full of fainting people. Everybody that had sense had no clothes on, if possible. And it was really rough and tough. And this was the day that he had to, that old Buck was the name of the dog. So I said, oh, we'll try it. He just sat down like a dog does. He's a big fella with his tongue out a mile and panted. Gable tried to buy the dog. He did everything, and the dog idolized him. They gave him food. They even hid him, you know, to try and get him, but he wouldn't do it. So out of hell with it. He just stayed there. I got an idea. I got a couple of dogs in heat. One was a Pomeranian who wasn't as big as Buck's head. Now, this is on the level.
Yeah.
The other one was one that was French poodle. Yeah. So I finally got the scene all started and everything else, and the two dogs were being leashed alongside, just out of camera, and he got a sighting. I'm telling you, he would have taken that damn thing right to San Francisco, really and truth. But the pathetic part about the whole thing was, when it was all over, and we put the two dogs in the car to take away, poor old Buck watched that car go away as if it was his life, the end of his life. He would never speak to Gable again. Gable went over and tried to give him a titbit, and he snapped at him, and this is the tip. This is Gable to me. And I think when you think it all over, it's a volume. He came to me and he said, Bill, this is the first time in all my life I've ever double-crossed anybody.
Oh, that's lovely.
I don't think anybody else is going to say this, but to me, and knowing him as well as I did, Gable is the most tragic man that the motion picture business has ever had.
Why do you say tragic? Why do you say that?
Because of all the things that happened, all the things that happened to him. I don't want to go through the whole thing. Well, for instance, when he married that delightful gal.
Lombard.
And that was delightful. And I can remember lots of times, especially a couple of times at Fred McMurray's house where we had a party, and everybody would leave but a few, you know, about 10 or 12 of the vets. And then she'd go have fun. And she was so beautiful and so clothed so gorgeously. And this one particular night, she danced beautifully and ended up in the fountain on purpose. Then she went upstairs and got herself all undressed and put on Fred McMurray's pajamas and Fred McMurray's wife. Now, you know, Fred McMurray's a big guy. And she came down, and this was the kind of a guy. And Gable gazed and looked at this woman with a love that I've never seen in my life. She was fascinating by him, you know, and I'm sure that that was his great love.
In 1942, Carole Lombard eagerly goes on a war bond tour. Though some now say she was apprehensive about leaving home because Gable was having a momentary fling with another actress.
And leaving you now, I want you all to join me in raising your hands and making the sign of victory. The V sign popularized by our famous ally across the sea, Winston Churchill. Heads and hands up, America. Let's give a rousing cheer that'll be heard in Berlin and Tokyo.
Flying back, instead of taking a train, because she wanted to return to Gable quickly, Carole's plane is first reported missing over the mountains near Las Vegas. As Gable flew to the site, rescue parties set out hoping to find survivors. There were none. Carole Lombard was 32 years old. She and Gable had been married less than 3 years. Gable's grief is compounded with guilt because as chairman of a Hollywood Victory Committee, he had encouraged Carole to go on the tour.
Gable, as citizen of the States, do hereby acknowledge to have voluntarily enlisted this 12th day of August, 1942, as a soldier in the Army of the United States of America for the duration of the war, plus 6 months.
And that you will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over you
according to the laws and articles of war, so help you God.
I do.
The wartime Air Force was theoretically no place for a 41-year-old actor grieving for his wife. But Gable, feeling lost and drinking heavily before he enlisted, wanted to escape his memories and carry on where Carole had left off. In his early years of struggle, Gable had been a young man of calculating ambition. Now life and years had graced him with a measure of dignity and heroism. Though terrified of airplanes now, he became an aerial gunner. But the Air Force assigned him to produce training films and used him constantly for publicity. Surrounded by boys half his age, who risked their lives every day, he resented the star treatment and volunteered for 5 combat missions over Germany. At war's end, Gable, approaching middle age, would return to Hollywood, uncertain about his life and his career.
Gable's back and Garson's got him. What? Gable's back and Garson's got him? Gable's back and Garson's got him. Gable's back and Garson...
At the age of 48, a lonely Clark Gable takes his 4th bride, Lady Sylvia Ashley, former wife of Douglas Fairbanks Sr., and they commemorate their marriage by planting a tree. Lady Ashley resembles Carole Lombard, but the similarities end there. The marriage will end in less than 2 years. Clark Gable was never an easy man to know, especially during those tragic years. But someone who was close to him for many years, the good and the bad, was a newswoman, one of the best ever. She dates back to the swashbuckling days of William Randolph Hearst. Her latest book is Some Are Born Great. But what she doesn't know about Hollywood simply isn't worth discussing. Adler Rogers, St. John. Mr. Johns, it's so nice to see you again after all these years.
It's been a while. We worked at Metro together.
I know, a long time. We did some research on Gable, and it suggested that during his early, tough, poor years, that he became a withdrawn, moody, tight-fisted man. Is that true?
Nonsense. I mean...
I had a feeling it would be nonsense. Yeah.
At least, I mean, I knew him when he first came out here, and I found him very... For instance, my clearest first memory of Clark, he came down to my house in Malibu, one you know, to talk to me about replacing Jack Gilbert in a story of mine, because Gilbert couldn't talk. And so Mr. Gable was up for the part, and it was a glorious day, and my kids were all over the place. My son Bill was then 15 or something, and he said, Mr. Gable, do you want to go swimming? And Mr. Gable said, why, Bill said, oh, come on. Clark said, I haven't got any trunks. Bill said, I got all sizes of trunks, and went and got them. So poor Gable went out and went swimming with the kids, 8 or 10 of them up and down the beach. Came back, you couldn't believe. He had seaweed hanging out of his ears and sand coming down and just a hair all over. And I said, what's the matter with you? can't you swim? He said, I can swim, but not in that thing out there. He'd never been in the ocean before. People say to me, well, you knew Gable so long, and so, well, what about it? And I can wrap it up in only 2 words. He was a man.
Absolutely. And you always knew he was in the room.
Oh, yes, yes. And yet he never
presence.
did anything, you know, he came in quietly. And I remember the night of the famous fight with Dave Selznick. Were you there that night?
No, it's one I missed.
Well, I'm sorry you missed it, because that was 3 or 4 rounds of the best I ever saw. But Gable tried so hard to avoid it. You remember David was very belligerent, Dave Selznick. And he was a big guy, and they tell me a great barroom fighter. I never knew him in any barroom, so I don't know. But he was kind of...
He didn't hang out in bars.
...antagonistic about things. And he finally brought this about, and he was much bigger than Clark, and he was the big producer and all of this. And Clark kept saying, no, no. He was trying his best to walk away from it. And when Mr. Selznick wouldn't have it, he took him in about a half a round. I mean, Gable just walked in and said, all right, Butch, bang, bang.
He was that tough.
That was the end of that.
You and he were such close friends, and was it at least part of it, at least, because of your children?
No possible question. Gable adored children. He really did. And when he first came down to the beach to work with me, there was Bill, who was 12, and the kids, and all of Victor, who was about 13, and he loved to be with them.
That's marvelous. He loved kids, but what about his reputation in Hollywood's, what do we call it, romantic Olympics?
Well, I don't know. I knew Clark very well after Carole was killed. I saw him every day for a year. We were looking for a story for him, trying to get him to make another picture. And I was hired by Metro to find a picture that Gable would make. So I saw a great deal of him. I would have said that of all the Hollywood stars I've ever known, including you, that Mr. Gable was the least of a woman chaser. I always thought he was a little bit bored with the whole thing.
You'd rather go hunting, yeah.
In this order, hunting and fishing came first.
Yeah.
Well, to go hunting and fishing, you should go out camping. See, this is one of the things that Carole did that was so wonderful. She learned to be a great camper, not to put the fire out, you know, but know what to do. He loved hunting, fishing, camping. He loved poker.
Yeah.
And he didn't like women in the game. He used to put up with me once in a while when I told him who brought me up.
Was she a very social-minded person?
I don't think after she met Gable and married him that Carole ever had a mind except to fulfill what she thought Clark wanted. And she knew he liked people, and she knew he liked them around to talk to, and she kept the house full of people and interesting things. And after she was gone, it was very rough on him because he didn't know just what to do about it.
I know, he had it.
And that's one of the reasons I saw so much of him about then, because I was looking for a story for him, and I'd go up to talk story, and I'd see he was alone for dinner, and he didn't want to be.
But nobody in the world would believe that, you know.
Didn't want to be. And he'd say, why don't we call up so-and-so? Let's call up Clarence Brown. Let's call up somebody and have them come up for dinner.
How would you explain Carole Lombard's special place in his life? Was it humor?
You see, when you come right down to it, now you check me and see if you don't think I'm right. Every woman who has been a great person to attract men, really, not the kind that you just make up, but the real ones, they've all been clowns.
True.
Every single one of them.
Very true.
Marion Davies, who was, after all, the technical mistress of one of the great men of our time, was a clown. She kept him laughing all the time. Well, Carole could always. And another thing, he was scared to death. He was a man, and he was scared to death of sloppy sentiment, you know. romantic words and stuff like that. And I remember one day we were leaning against the fence and looking out at the acreage out there at Encino, which wasn't all that big, but the way he looked at it, you'd have thought it was a ranch in Montana.
Yeah.
And he said, "My, isn't this beautiful?" And he turned to her and he said, "Oh, Mother," he always called her Mother, I don't know why.
Yeah.
"Mother, look what we've got. Isn't a thing in the world we want each other, this house, this lovely place here. Aren't we the luckiest people to have ever? Is there anything in the world you want?" And she said, "Yeah, I'd like another load of manure for that South 40.
I'm going to ask you a rather personal, heavy question, and the truth now. Were you a little bit in love with Gable?
No, not that way.
Well, that's a straight answer.
Yes, it is. I would try to say it this way. I think there's such a thing as being in love. And I think there's such a thing as loving. I loved Clark. I wasn't in love with him. I loved him. And I think he loved me. We were friends. You know.
That's a lovely thing to have.
Well, as you get a little older, as you get as old as I am, which is as old as you can be, then...
I wouldn't say that.
Well, 80 is a fair age. And then you begin to realize how much friendship means. And Gable was a great friend, and I loved him devotedly. But we started, as I say, working together and just going swimming and everything. So we became friends. But the year that after, you see, after Carole went, Gable was never the same.
I've always heard.
Never. The change, see, when we went up to where she had cracked up. And to me, this is one of the great expressions and proofs of love that I've ever seen. We went up to the place, and the plane was still up there.
In the mountains, yeah.
And Ralph Wheelwright and Howard Strickling and the men from Metro. And he started up toward the plane. And Ralph grabbed him and said, "Don't go up there, Clark. Please don't." And he looked at me and I said, "No, don't. Don't. She wouldn't want you to." And he stood and looked a minute at the snow and the crack up and everything and turned and walked down the hill.
What a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. But the fact that she wouldn't want you to see her like that, because she was always so lovely and so beautiful. And
let me ask you, his father was supposedly a hard-bitten man and never approved of actors. How did Gable really feel about being an actor?
I think it horrified him practically every day of his life.
Why?
Well, I think, first of all, he thought he was not a good actor, which bothered him. And he said these words to me one time: "Only time that I ever saw myself when I thought I had a right to be called a good actor was in the scene in Gone with the Wind where the little girl died, where Bonnie got killed."
Yeah.
Said, "That I think I did well." But he said
that's the
rest
only
of
thing
it,
he thought he did.
The only thing I ever did in my whole acting career that satisfied me. And he said the rest of that Rhett Butler strutting around there. He said, I was always scared to death that the audiences would come in and say, "He thinks that's Rhett Butler," and get up and walk out. He really felt that way. He was scared to death.
He was very insecure about his work, huh? He was very insecure about his work.
Well, I don't think he said, "I'm in here." You know, he and Spencer Tracy
well,
were
that was
there
one of his
together.
great friends, wasn't it, Tracy?
Actually, if I am being honest with you for the moment, no.
They weren't?
No, not basically.
Well, what kind of relationship they had?
Well, that was a
because
strange...
Tracy was really a marvelous actor.
That was the point. Gable used to look at him with absolute anguish. Not envy, but, "Oh, why can't I do that? Look at that guy. Look what he can do." And I think Spencer, who was not as saintly as we're now making him out to be, you know. He was a wonderful guy, but he wasn't a saint. Now you'd think he was. And I think that Spencer used to look at Gable and think he's a bigger star than I am and he can't act his way out of a paper bag, you know.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Just sitting there on nothing but just being Gable. And on the other hand, Gable would have given anything to ever, he said, I'm always Gable, I'm always me. He said, look at me strutting down the street there in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think of me as some guy that was born, grew up, was a gambler in San Francisco. They still think I'm Clark Gable.
Yeah. He never lived to see, as we said before, never lived to see the birth of his son.
No.
What is his boy like?
Well, I haven't seen him in a couple of years, but the last time, Howard Strickling, who was Gable's best friend, of course, and he looked so much like his father that you burst into tears, literally.
Really?
Because it's so tragic that he didn't, with his love of, of course, Kay had other children, and he fell in love with those, I think, as soon as he did with Kay. He just adored those children.
How would you sum up Gable in one single sentence?
I don't need a sentence.
All right, in a word.
A man. Of all the men I've ever known, and I covered sports for a good many years, and I'm inclined to... I asked Dempsey once for his definition of a champion. And he said, well, very simple. I said, do they all have the same attributes? Do they all have this? And he said, always. And there are only two. I said, only two? He said, just two. You have to be able to do it Tuesday night at 10 minutes after 10 in Madison Square Garden. That's the first one.
I love it.
And the second one is you have to get up off the floor when you can't. That's the champion. Well, I think Gable was like that, too. I think he was, but I think he was, from a woman's standpoint, I think he was a man. He was nowadays you have trouble telling which is who, and everything is so mixed up. And it doesn't seem to me, looking around, you have many men anymore. You haven't got any movie stars to speak of, and the ones you have are kind of lemon jello, And it seems to me that a man like Gable was a man to the world, to men. You remember this. They hated Valentino, men.
Men, yeah.
And a good many other of the great stars that were matinee idols and such. They adored Gable. Men liked Gable.
It's a very rare quality. He had men, women, children.
Right. Well, that's what I mean by that whole thing.
I think that's a perfect
I don't think... He said, and he said these words. He said, I have one thing to offer. I love being alive. I love life. I have fun being alive. I like to do this. I like to do that. I like to go home and make love to my wife. And they take a look at me and say, you got an idea there, Butch. I'll go home and make love to their wives. He said, I think that's what I've had to offer.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming down, Miss St. John. Nice to see you
I
again.
hope Clark heard us.
I do. I'm sure he did.
I
thank
think
you.
So.
In his 50s, Clark Gable marries Kay Williams, a girlfriend from the past who shares his love of the open sky and understands that she can never fully replace Carole Lombard in his heart. Life is good again, and the Gables will soon expect what he's always wanted, a child. Four months later, a child is born to Kay Gable. It's a boy, just as his father said it would be. Kay's first words on seeing John Clark Gable were, he's beautiful, just what Pa wanted.
Howdy.
I love man. He ain't a small man. My man is all man, and the only one for me. Moonlight was meant for lovers. Breezes were meant to sigh.
Sounds like the gales we used to get off Rio Pongo.
Obviously, Judy Garland wasn't the only one inspired to song by Clark Gable, any more than was Yvonne DeCarlo the only one moved to passion.
To all those places?
He's been gone nearly 15 years now, yet he still lingers in our minds. He, Rhett Butler, Fletcher Christian, and all those other adventurers, reporters, and rogues. Because of his screen image, there's been unavoidable speculation about Gable's own romantic prowess. Miss Lombard, with typical candor, said frankly that in real life, Gable was no Gable. But how many men are? What matters here, however, is that on the screen he was able to project for us a romantic ideal.
Who are you then?
In the words of one screenwriter, he was as masculine as a battering
You think I've
ram.
got freedom? I got a past I'd like to forget, but I can't run away from it. No more than you can run away from what you are.
Clark Gable began in films by pushing girls around, but swiftly graduated, as we've seen, into a superb boudoir technician. One of the lovely actresses who can testify to that, cinematically of course, is his co-star in Band of Angels, Yvonne DeCarlo. Nearly 20 years later, when you watch yourself in a scene with Gable, how does it make you feel?
Oh, well, sometimes a little bit sad, because I don't look the way I did look. But I don't know, he doesn't seem to have been gone as far as I'm concerned. Never thought that way. That's the same way I always felt about Mr. DeMille. I would say Mr. DeMille is, you know, and I never thought about was somehow. I just don't feel that way about Mr. Gable.
You said that Gable was very, very easy to act with, but hard to get to know. Why was that?
Well, at the beginning, because he didn't know me and he didn't know what kind of a person I was, it took us, I think, a week or so on location before I finally found the formula of loosening him up as far as I'm concerned. Now, I don't say he was with Raoul Walsh, who was a real lusty fellow and a marvelous director, but very, very open, and they were real buddies and real friends. Of course, they were open together, but I wanted a secret formula, and I found it one day on location.
What was that?
Well, I noticed that he liked one or two rough words said to him. Kathleen used to say, call him names, you know, and say, I'll kick you in the A.
Donkey, yeah, okay. I know what you're talking about. We're not allowed to say
And he would sort of brighten up with that sort of talk, you know, and so one day we were walking by the honey wagons, and the public doesn't know what the honey wagon is, I suppose.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is the men's room or ladies' room.
Yes, and it's in the shape of a trailer. So we were walking by, and the fans would follow us with cameras wherever we went. So I said, well, I said, if you go in there, that woman and those children and that man over there, they're going to be waiting, and they're going to get you. I swear they're going to get you coming out and zipping up your front. And and so I found the formula. He started to laugh, and from then on we started talking semi-dirty together, and we were pals.
It was hard for Gable to find a woman who could make him happy. What kind of woman is Kay? I mean, you said she's terrific.
She's outgoing and has a lot of built-in personality. I mean, that's not put on. That's just the personality that is there and always has been there. And she's the type of woman.
She has marvelous humor.
Oh, yes. She has just, it's there. That's all. And it's always coming out. And she, maybe she was smart enough to realize that he did like that kind of talk. Or perhaps it was just natural with her. You know, the kind of rough talk and come on, paw, and get your donkey over here, and, you know, that sort of thing. But great personality, lots of fun.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, for coming down.
Thank you, Peter.
Nice to see you. When dealing with a figure as colorful as Clark Gable, it's awfully tempting to show how eloquent you can be. But the critic, Charles Champlin, beat us to it and said it all anyway. He wrote, Gable was the greatest male star of his time. And to think about him now is to realize with sorrow and a double sense of loss how much we in the world have changed and how distant and uncomplicated his time already seems. To think about Gable now is to experience an almost unutterable nostalgia.